Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, sponsored by EarthX, the world's largest environmental experience, and also sponsored by Natural Awakenings magazine. Live your healthiest life on a healthier planet. Now, here's your host, Bernice Butler.
Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. We are now in our third season, and we remain just as excited as ever to continue to help you explore and understand the unbreakable relationship between your health and the health of the planet. Here we look at the hottest topics related to our environment and its sustainability and how they affect your health and wellness. Here, issues like climate change, plastic pollution, extreme weather events, and others will meet up with everyday impacts like allergies and asthma, digestive issues and gut health, cancers, lung and heart issues, and more. So listen today as we interview experts for today's show on plastic pollution, effects on waterways, food chain, and our waste systems. Now, plastic is a synthetic organic polymer. And a polymer is a chemical compound or a mixture of compounds made primarily from petroleum with properties that are ideally suited for a wide variety of applications, including packaging, building and construction materials, household and sports equipment, vehicles, electronics, agriculture, and most notably, plastics. And over 300 million tons of plastics are produced every year, half of which is used to create single-use items such as plastic shopping bags and grocery bags, cups, and straws. And if discarded improperly, as they usually are, plastic waste can and does harm the environment and our biodiversity. At least 14 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean every year. Plastic debris is currently the most abundant type of litter in the ocean, making up 80% of all marine debris found from surface waters, which is like the puddles or pools of water you see when you walk out your door, to deep sea sediments. Plastic is found on the shorelines of each and every continent, with more plastic waste found near popular tourist destinations as well as densely populated areas. The main sources of plastic debris found in the ocean are land-based, coming from our urban and storm water runoff, sewer overflows, just flat-out littering, inadequate waste disposal and management, industrial activities, tire abrasion, construction, and illegal dumping. And ocean-based plastic pollution originates primarily, though, from the fishing industry. That's what they do to themselves, as well as nautical activities and aquaculture. And under the influence of UV rays, wind, currents, and other natural factors, plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller particles called microplastics. And these are the very, very small particles that are less than 5 millimeters in size, or nanoplastics. And these are even smaller. We're talking here about the size of a strand of hair. And the small size makes them easy for marine life, as well as human life, to ingest accidentally. Many countries lack the infrastructure to prevent plastic pollution, such as sanitary landfills, incinerator facilities, recycling capacity, and circular economy infrastructure. Proper management as well as disposal of waste systems is also a problem. And this leads to plastic leakage into our rivers and oceans. The legal and illegal global trade of plastic waste may also damage ecosystems where waste management systems are not sufficient to contain this plastic waste. So why is this important? Well, as we noted, plastic pollution is a widespread problem affecting the marine environment. It threatens ocean health and the health of marine species. It threatens our food safety and quality of our food. It threatens our human health. It threatens coastal tourism, and it contributes to climate change. And as it relates to the impact on food and human health, microplastics have been found in tap water, beer, salt, and they are present in all samples collected in the world's oceans, including the Arctic. Several chemicals used in the production of plastic materials are known to be toxic and poisonous and to interfere with the body's endocrine system, causing developmental, reproductive, neurological, and immune disorders in both human beings and wildlife. Recently, microplastics were found in human placentas, but much more research is needed to determine just how widespread of a problem this actually is. And toxic contaminants also accumulate on the surface of plastic as a result of the prolonged exposure to seawater. When marine organisms ingest plastic debris, these contaminants enter their digestive systems, and over time, they migrate into the entire food web. And this transfer of contaminants between marine species and humans through consumption of seafood has been identified as a very prolific health hazard, and there is lots of research ongoing. Plastic pollution undeniably has become one of the most pressing environmental challenges of our time. The production and incineration of plastics is a major contributor to climate change, as we mentioned earlier. And plastic waste is also choking our waterways as well as infiltrating our very basic food supply. If these current trends continue, then roughly 12 billion metric tons of plastic waste will be in our landfills or polluting our environment by 2050. And that's the equivalent of almost 80 million blue whales. Plastic pollution, without doubt, is having an extremely negative impact on our oceans and wildlife health. And the high-income countries tend to generate much more plastic waste per person. However, it appears to be the management of plastic waste that determines the risk of plastic entering the ocean. High-income countries have very effective waste management systems, and mismanagement waste and plastic that ends up in the oceans should not be that much, but it still is a problem. An estimated 20% of all plastic waste in the oceans comes from marine sources in some regions, and marine sources dominate. For example, more than half of the plastics in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, as they call it, comes from fishing nets, ropes, and lines, all associated with marine uses. But it's important to keep in mind that plastic is a unique material with many benefits, which is why it's out there so much. It's cheap, it's versatile, it's lightweight, and it's resistant. And this makes it a valuable material for many functions. It can also provide some environmental benefits, even though it does definitely provide many environmental detriments. It plays a critical role of maintaining food quality and food safety and reducing food waste. The trade-off between plastics and substitutes or complete bans are therefore complex and often can create a negative knock-on impact to the environment if not properly thought out. Plastic disposal methods are a lot of the problem, as we mentioned earlier. Prior to 1980, recycling and incineration of plastic was negligible. 100% was therefore discarded. But from 1980 for incineration and from 1990 for recycling, rates have increased in average by 0.7% per year. And in 2015, an estimated 55% of global plastic waste was discarded, and 25% was incinerated, and 20% was recycled. That's better, but still not good. If we then take this information and estimate historical trends through 2050, then it's estimated that by 2050, incineration rates could increase or would increase to 50%, recycling to 44%, and discarded waste would fall to 6%. However, this is an estimate, and it's only an estimate. Microplastics are the real problem, and that's because they are a more direct threat to people and human health. A recent study found that particles of microfibers in packaged sea salt, beer, bottled water, and tap water are making it virtually certain we are ingesting lots and lots of microplastics. In bottled beverages, microplastics could be infiltrating during the bottling process, and microfibers, indeed, it's found, could be falling from the atmosphere into the reservoirs that supply our tap water. Even for researchers steeped in the field, it still comes as a shock. And it shows us just how the mismanagement of our waste is coming back to haunt us. This is a lot. But here today to help us unpack some of this and understand it some more are two experts, Maria Westebos, and she is the founder of the Plastic Soup Foundation, and Hans Peter Arp. Hans is a professor in the Environmental Chemistry Department at the Norwegian University of Science. And we are going to go to a break now. We will come back and tell you more about these two experts who come today to help us unpack some of this. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods markets, natural grocers, central markets, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Check them out. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. And we are told with the best Christmas trees in Texas. Check them out at nhg.com. And our other sponsors, Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, none mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. To today's show on plastic pollution, effects on waterways, food chain, and waste system. And as I mentioned before the break, we have two experts who are here to help us unpack some of this and understand it, because it indeed is a lot. We have with us today again Hans Peter Arp. Hans is a professor in environmental chemistry at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and he's also an expert advisor at the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute. Hans has recently been working with the German Environment Agency with developing the specific scientific basis for new regulations on persistent, mobile, and toxic substances. They're called PMT, and they sound really nasty. And these are chemicals that can enter and remain in drinking water and human blood for decades once they've been emitted, such as PFAS, which we've talked a lot about. On the waste management side, Hans has projects related to finding sustainable ways to remove hazardous chemicals from waste streams, such as e-waste and contaminated biosolids, in an effort to remove hazardous chemicals from our circular economy. Recently, he started co-leading a project called Zero PM, or Zero Pollution of Persistent Mobile Substances, which seeks ways to eliminate hazardous chemicals by preventing their use, prioritizing which ones society should focus on, and sustainable techniques to remove them. Hans has authored and co-authored over 108 papers, one of which is called The Global Threat of Plastic Pollution, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about that today. Welcome, Hans. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernice. You got it all correct. It's a delight to be here. I'm very happy.
Thank you, and we're glad that you could make it to join us today, too. And our other guest is Maria Westebos. Maria is founder of the Plastic Soup Foundation. Maria is an expert in mass communications, focusing on both traditional and new media. And up until she founded Plastic Soup Foundation, she was a broadcast journalist. In February 2011, Maria founded the grassroots Dutch Plastic Soup Foundation and started creating awareness all over Holland, Europe, and the world for this severe environmental problem. With their first campaign called Beat the Microbead, the Plastic Soup Foundation established change in the use of microplastics by international businesses, local and national governments, consumers, and non-government organizations. And because of this, Maria ranked in 2018 number 18 in the Dutch list of the 100 most influentials in what's called the Land of Do-Well. Plastic Soup's tagline, which I love, is no plastic in our water or our bodies. And I think that just jumped out at me. And their mission is to stop the plastic soup tsunami as soon as possible. And if we do not achieve this, then we're leaving future generations with a terrible plastic plague. We are a single-use issue environmental organization that is concerned with one thing: stopping plastic pollution at its source. Welcome, Maria. We are so happy you could be with us today. And did I get all of that right?
Did it completely right. Thank you.
Thank you all. And last week we had guests where we talked more about the human health, digging into the nitty-gritties of human health aspects of plastic pollution. And today you all are just really going to help us fill that out as we focus in on its effects and prevalence in our waterways, food chain, and waste systems, all of which feed into the health. You can't separate them all. So let's start out, Maria, by you talking to us a lot about how exactly does plastic pollution affect our waterways? And then can you define for us plastic soup? And then tell us about what caused you to launch the Plastic Soup Foundation.
Well, I do think it's not only about the plastic soup in our waterways. It's raining plastic already. And we are especially known by now because of our plastic health summits. We organized 2 of them, and we reached out last October we reached over 400 million people worldwide straight away, and over 1 billion people online and potentially really worldwide. And it's all about human health, because I think when you talk plastic and plastic pollution, you talk about One Health, about planet boundaries, because plastic reached our planet boundaries, and you're talking about poisoning all the life there is. So it's much more than only polluting our waterways. When I started with it 10 years ago, almost 11, I thought it was polluting our waterways. But in the last 10 years, I always say if God would have had an 8th day, he would not have invented plastic, because plastic is the only thing human added to the world. Plastic is not natural, and it's really the only thing we added to, how do you say that? To nature. And it doesn't go away, never, never, never anymore. So, leading the Plastic Soup Foundation is like a journey which is getting more and more and worse every day. And on the other hand, we have great victories, and we win a lot with a lot of organizations worldwide. You never walk alone. And I started with it, to come back on that question of you. I started with it because I was struck by lightning when I heard about the plastic soup early 2008. I had a researcher working on the problems of our time and solutions, and we can solve every problem. We can give everybody water. We can give everybody food. Everything we do is a political decision. But there was one thing that we cannot solve anymore, or I never heard of it at least, and that's plastic. And when I heard that, I thought this happened under my watch. When I was little, I was driving on a wooden step. I had an iron little bike with bakelite rockets on it, but everything was steel. And under my watch, everything became plastic. So I thought this is not acceptable. And if I want to do something good for the world, then I change my ways.
Indeed.
And since I am a mass communicator, it's in my power to reach out for many people. So I did.
You use what you do best to help address the problem. Maria, when you say plastic soup, tell people what plastic soup is.
Well, plastic soup is not so much more than that Captain Charles Moore in 1979 found plastic when he fell still on his catamaran in the North Pacific Gyre, and he saw plastic, and he thought, here is something wrong. So he called it plastic soup, and that woke the world up. It's that easy.
Yeah. And I think the inference is that in any liquid, there's lots and lots of plastic. That's how our vegetable soup is. It's a liquid base with lots of vegetables in it. And so when you look at that plastic soup, it's something liquid, but it's got all this plastic in it. And what I've learned through doing the show and talking to people such as you, it's not just liquid. The air is plastic soup as well. You can't see it and grab it like you can water, but it's just as prevalent.
It's on the bottom of the ocean, it's on the tops of the Himalaya, it's everywhere, and you cannot avoid it anymore. They call it now plastic dust, but plastic dust is not so attractive for people. If you say plastic dust, they say, what? Well, what the fuck?
Yeah, I don't think they get the whole enormity, though, of plastic soup. It's the whole Earth atmosphere is plastic soup. I don't think they get that enormity either, but, we hope to push that ball forward today. Thank you. Hans, can you tell us more about how plastic from the ocean has now caused plastics to enter our food chains? And just kind of connect those dots for people. Because you all know, and I know from experts like you that I've talked to, that this is an enormous problem. But I don't think people see it. They tend to maybe focus in on what I talked about earlier, all its valuable benefits. So can you connect those dots for us, though, plastic from the ocean into our food system and harming humans?
Yeah, well, sure. There's a lot to unpack there, and it's a complex issue, of course. But I'll try to also link it back to dust, because it's also important to realize that we get plastic from so many exposures, and obviously through the food chain is one of them, and through seafood. So I'll just talk about that first, but then I'll just kind of bring it back. And now, obviously, when you look at a fish from like visually, you cut open their guts, the place you're going to find plastic is in their stomach or something like that, and that's where the largest quantity is. So if you're ever eating like a whole fish, like a whole sardine or a whole mussel from a blue mussel from a plastic contaminated area, then you're going to get that complete dosage of that plastic. But what's more uncertain is the nanoplastic that you mentioned earlier, because it's an active area of research if they can go through the tissues of the fish, and if you eat things that can go through the tissues of the fish, maybe they can go through the tissues of humans. It's kind of a research frontier, but it's a very real concern and what effects that could cause. Now, that being said, I just want to bring that to when we were trying to research these things in the lab and looking at tissues in fish, some problem we have is that there's so much plastic in the air that it's contaminating all our samples. So this is that plastic dust that we're talking about. And so we're getting plastic there, and we're getting plastic in our air, and it's very difficult actually to differentiate sometimes.
What you're saying, it's difficult to carry out your experiments or your research on plastic in fish because the plastic in the air is contaminating your samples, maybe?
Oh, yeah. No, and we had a real problem with that under COVID, because we started, everybody had a mask up, and we were wearing these disposable blue masks, and that was fine. And then we're processing our samples, going through all the steps, and then we find all these blue fibers in our samples, and we couldn't quantify what the plastic was, and we traced it back to them being particles that were just shedding off our masks and contaminating the lab. And you got to think, if they're contaminating the lab, how many of those were we breathing? So that was quite an issue.
Indeed, and that raises a question to me, and that is the blue mask. There's plastic dust coming from those, so the plastic dust is coming between me and you, but also, I guess, the plastic dust I'm breathing in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And this is like a health issue, so we got to, what is the risk of COVID versus the risk of plastic? But we can prevent that by avoiding the single-use thing. Disposable masks are convenient, and they have their role in medical emergency. But that's why it was always good to get some cloth-based.
And we are going to go to break now, and we'll come back and finish this conversation. We're going to go to break. We've been with Dr. Hans Peter Arp from the University of Norway, and we have been with Maria Westerbos, founder of Plastic Soup Foundation. We'll be right back with these experts on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today, to our show on plastic pollution, its effects on waterways, food chain, and waste systems. And we are back with Maria Westerbos, founder of Plastic Soup Foundation, and Dr. Hans Peter Arp with the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Again, thank you all for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we hope we have enough time to get as much information as we need. Before the break, Hans, you were telling us about the lesser-known problem that is happening with COVID, and I know that we have to put that aside to really focus in on COVID, but you did mention a good solution, and that was the plastic fibers that are leaching into the air from these blue masks, leaching into the air outside our faces and leaching into the air we're breathing, because they're on that side as well. But I think that is a very prime example that everybody can see, touch, and understand of this plastic soup or plastic dust that surrounds us and inundates our world. We were connecting the dots with the plastic entering our food chain from the oceans, but we want to talk about other ways that plastic enters our food chain and harms humans.
Yeah, another aspect that's also important to bring up. I talked about microplastics in the stomachs and nanoplastics maybe in the tissues, but the kind of the smallest element there is of course the chemical additives. But also, when plastic breaks down, it also makes many small molecules that we don't know much about. Sometimes these are called oligomers. So these are somewhere between nanoplastic and molecules. And that is something that we know very little about. But we'd expect that the concentration of these unknown chemicals are also increasing. And what effect these can have on the food chain or the health of fish and humans is unknown. It's just something that we recognize is an unknown increasing background chemical that's coming from plastic that's there. And so it's like you got this new size range that's between molecules and nanoplastic. That's also a very emerging area that I'm very interested in as well.
I've heard, because every year, and this is the third year that we talked about the plastic pollution theme on our show, I'm familiar with the nanoplastic and the microplastics, but now this new emerging one that's even smaller.
Yeah, no, it's, we can talk about a plastic soup, but we also have an unknown chemical soup. And this is like the residue of the persistent mobile chemicals that I'm working with and these very persistent plastic breakdown products. And a lot of the chemicals that leach out of plastic are persistent as well. And this is the big connection to why plastic/persistent chemicals or anything made by man that's persistent can lead to changes in our planetary structure, because these just increase and accumulate. And we're worried about the point where they cause damage, because when they cause damage, you can't get rid of them.
I want to help our audience understand the persistent mobile chemicals. And am I to understand that these are those additives in plastic or that ride on plastic?
Well, plastic has a large variety of additives. Some are persistent, some are not persistent, some are more toxic than others, but some of them are these PMTs, and PFAS is a very well-known chemical that's used in a lot of plastics for various reasons. And there's a lot of PMTs used in the production of plastic, a lot of solvents that they use to make plastics or plasticizers or PMTs. And what they're unique for is they don't break down the environment, but they do not stick to anything. So, for instance, if you pour them in your soil, they'll go through the soil, enter the groundwater, and then enter your drinking water. And a lot of times,
that's why you're calling them persistent.
Persistent and mobile. And mobile, because we drink them, and we're drinking them all the time.
I like to talk more about what Hans Peter is saying, because we are doing quite some research. We are working with a lot of scientists worldwide. If you talk additives, for example, there is now proof that, for example, if you inhale fibers from your clothes, especially from your clothes, and it's nylon, This nylon is releasing additives in there, and that's attacking your lung cells, and you're getting inflammations, and your inflammation system is getting stress, and it develops cancer and all other kinds of diseases. We already know, and don't get scared now, that plastic is in your blood, it's in your brain, it's in your heart, it's in everything. So plastic soup is not out there only and not on the ocean floor, it's in your body. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's additives, and it's plastic itself, and the combination of those two, and how that holds how that holds to each other. That's a little bit difficult still, but we do know that plastic is attacking our own bodies, and it's even in the placenta, and it's in unborn babies already. So the ocean floor is very interesting, and that's in plankton over there, and that it's in whales and in everything that lives, but it's more even maybe important for people to know that it's in themselves. And it's attacking our immune system, and it's attacking our organs. So I don't want to scare anybody, because this is our most important job as Plastic Soup Foundation, that is talking about the health issues that plastic is causing. And that doesn't make us always very popular. But I do think that we reach a lot of people with it. And I don't want to make people scared, but I do think if you need to take care. You know, I'm living in a house with little plastic. I have a wooden floor, and I have a wooden table, and I have, I wear cotton clothes. But then I'm very privileged. I'm not against plastic clothes, but be aware of the fact that you inhale your own clothes.
So Describe to people what clothes have plastic.
Oh,
all except
69% of all clothes is plastic, and within 10 years it's 80%, because we don't have enough water to make cotton and wool for us all.
Would you basically say all clothes from synthetic fabrics will have plastic?
No,
fibers?
You have good clothes. You have good clothes with long yarn, which is good knitted or woven, which is well protected and which will not rinse off that easily. But you also have clothes like from Primark that says if you wash it 5 times, you have new clothes of the emperor, and you don't see anything anymore. So you can say to fashion industry, fast fashion is fatal fashion. Then it's really getting very bad for our health and for ourselves. So if you buy clothes, be aware and you better pay a little bit more, and then you wear it much longer. But if you are really very into fashion and you want to dress up every time in a new pants or new shirts, well, then you contribute to fatal fashion, as we say.
Indeed, which seems to be proliferating lately, is the cheap, quickly produced fashions.
I could give some tips like what we do in Norway with we're big for, we have this expression that there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. And to deal with the weather that we have here, we're big fans of wool, and wool's just an amazing organic material because it can withstand a lot of things. And we have a colder climate than I guess you have in Texas, but I mean, when it rips, you can knit it together, depending on, of course, the knit that you get, or you can patch it, and it is, amazingly robust. I mean, I got wool T-shirts in the summer, and they're great when it's a bit windy sometimes, and I got a lot of ones for the winter, and I'm totally converted to wool clothing.
Good
so
deal.
That's just my clothing tip.
Thank you. And one last question. We only have like 2 minutes before we go to the break, and we'll on the other side. Hans, and you say that there are areas you've mentioned in some of your writing where plastic pollution is poorly reversible, and that you're concerned about these. Can you tell us about these areas?
Well, I'll give you one example. I can talk about soil later, but going to the sinking plastic that you talked about. Mm-hmm. Now, there's research that shows that a lot of that sinking plastic follows the same way that the organic things like the dead plankton and algae follow. And so they kind of accumulate. The plastic accumulates in these biological hot zones in the sediment bed. And a lot of these are unknown and unexplored and kind of a mystery ecosystem because, maybe you have to go 5 miles under the ocean to find them. And these things are getting rained on by plastic all the time, and it's accumulating in their habitat, and it's not going away. And so that's poorly reversible because there's no way we could remove that plastic. Now, I'm critical of removing plastic in the ocean, but try removing plastic from a sensitive sediment ecosystem 5 miles under the sea. That's impossible, and that's accumulating. So we probably are causing harm to these ecosystems that we don't even know about because these are creatures and habitats that very few people have the resources, like the submarines, to research that. And that's
Indeed.
An example. Yeah.
And so if that plastic is accumulating on the sea floor, is that having an impact on sea levels? And are there any other impacts?
Well, absolutely. Like these areas aren't in isolation. I mean, this is part of things like how nutrients get cycled in the ocean, how carbon gets cycled in the ocean. And so things are all connected to the carbon cycles and stuff like that. And so when you have some disruption on the seafloor that might not affect the nutrient balance, which affects the sea life in the sea and how well it can sequester carbon from the air. And so you could have just a decrease in sea life in general because of these ecosystem habitats.
We're going to go to break now, and we will be right back on the other side with Maria Westerbos, founder of Plastic Soup Foundation, and Hans-Peter Arp, to make us smarter. There is so much to cover here. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods markets, natural grocers, central markets, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more, and we are told with the best Christmas trees in Texas. Our other sponsor is Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, non-mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to today's episode of Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. We're talking about plastic pollution, its effects on waterways, food chain, and waste systems. And we are back with Maria Westerbos, who is founder and director of the Plastic Soup Foundation, and with Hans-Peter Arp with Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Again, thank both of you all for being with us. Maria, I want to start out with you this time. Can you tell us if there are any specific plastic items that are particularly harmful in our oceans and waterways and that you come across way too often in the work that y'all do at Plastic Soup Foundation?
Yeah, well, it's not 300 million tons, but it's 400 million tons already, and those are figures from the plastic industry itself. From those 400 million tons every year produced, 65% is single use. So, and we throw that away within 20 minutes. That are the food wraps, the coffee cups, the straws. But 65% of all this plastic we throw away within 20 minutes. And imagine what a disaster that is for the environment, because it never goes away anymore. And even if you burn it or you landfill it, it will one day come back into the environment, or it will go airborne or whatever it does not go away. So I would say let's stop with this 65% to start with.
Indeed. Can you tell us about any recent positive changes that tackle all of this, this crisis?
Well, the European Union is doing very good, and the Norwegian government is even the front runner of the whole world. And now France is joining that fight as being the new head of the European Union and the new chairman. So, but the Norwegian government congratulations, Hans Peter. It's taking the first steps to get a worldwide plastic treaty to stop all this pollution. You must imagine. I always say you're talking about what is lying on the bottom of the sea or high in the mountains, but imagine it's oil. It's oil. Everything is oil based. So you are looking at the biggest oil spill, and that must be something for you in Texas over there, where is a lot of oil. So it's the biggest oil spill you have ever seen. If 20% of the ocean right now is plastic, then 20% of the ocean is polluted by oil. If it's in your body is polluted by oil, including the additives in plastic, which is even worse. So I always say, if you imagine that, well, then get scared a little bit, please. And stop using all this single-use plastic you don't need. Don't put your apple in a plastic bag or your sandwich. Take something sustainable with you. Don't get every time a new throwaway cup. Let's make it easy. Let's go back to grandma's time.
Indeed. And I think to some degree that like the things you just mentioned, and they are in our control, and we are beginning to see some inroads there. But on the other hand, we go to the grocery store, and just about everything is wrapped in plastic.
It's all a push market. It's not a pull market. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking for that. Mm-hmm. I don't want it, but I cannot buy anything. So I go to my local marketplace, because my local marketplace sells everything straight from the farmer without any plastic. I don't buy vegetables in the supermarket. Why should I? And what my country does, it burns. My country has 200 incinerators. We burn plastic from all Europe.
And that's what people don't understand. That's just putting it back into the air. Yeah. We've talked about it, but I want to make sure that we have connected the dots about how plastic is forever. It's either incinerated or thrown out, and it goes into our air, contributing to that plastic soup or plastic dust. And then, Hans, tell us about some other ways that it then affects us and the impact that it has on climate change.
Oh, yeah. You just mentioned one. I mean, when you burn it, it'll also turn to CO2. So that's just like a slow conversion of plastic to CO2. And I mean, that also happens to some extent also with the small amount of plastic that does get broken down to CO2. That's like a delayed release. So even if we stop CO2 emissions today, they would be released by that. Now, I mean, of course, in other ways that it can affect the climate change is also just by disrupting these systems, like I talked about earlier, like the marine carbon pump that would affect how well the oceans can sequester carbon. And kind of related to this is just also with the breakdown. I mean, it's both related to change in climate change and also the change in impacts, because there's something that they call Professor Martin Riley called the global toxicity debt, which meant that all this plastic is out there, it's in the environment, and it will slowly degrade into what? And it's just going to be more of it degrading into something. And that'll be both climate change effects and also these small chemicals that are these additives that will just increasingly released over time. It's like we're just putting things out there to like a slowly releasing time bomb, and we don't know.
And they're going to come back to bite us, where my grandma said, where the sun don't shine. Hans, in some of your writing, I saw some very interesting solutions that you had mentioned to the plastic crisis. Can you tell us about those briefly?
Okay, well, yeah, so I'll just give you some examples from Norway, since that was mentioned. One is that we have a very good recycling scheme for the plastic bottles. So all plastic bottles that have like Coke or other drinks in them, it's functioning very well. You can recycle them at the same stores that you buy them, and the recycling rate is over 92% for the bottles. Another thing that Norway has done is like based on surveys of beach cleanups, seeing what kind of items are we finding the most, and then taking specific action on those products. So one of them was Q-tips. And then suddenly there was a lot of plastic Q-tips, and so they said, okay, now plastic Q-tips are banned in Norway. And then suddenly you have paper-based Q-tips, and that went well. Plus campaigns to tell people don't put your Q-tips down the toilet, because there's a lot of people that put Q-tips down the toilet. I never met any, but it's not something I normally ask.
I would never have thought to do that.
It's like, oh, I'm done. I'm putting them in the toilet. I don't know. But apparently it was a thing here in Norway. I don't know. But one of the more like big things, and this is a very controversial idea I have, like at least in terms of food packaging, is that we shouldn't have the complexity of food packaging we have now. I mean, like for instance, I talked about the PET bottles being recycled. So if there was only, say, 2 types of plastic and it had the exact same composition with the exact same additives, and the designers found a way to do that, and that means removing all the fancy colors and enzymes, it would just be like one boring type of plastic package, like ideally one size fits all, then that could be recycled more easily, especially if it's like a remoldable, remeltable plastic, and you put the deposit scheme on that. But this would require huge change every time this would affect. But I think it is a possible thing, and I think it is something that we should discuss going forward.
I heard you mention something about using, I guess, public policy such as taxes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So there should be, we can introduce more plastic tax. We often use because it's cheap. And if it's causing all this problems that future generations are going to have to pay for, either through health costs or environment remediation, that should be taxed now. So I don't think single-use plastic especially should be cheap. And that would also encourage people to reuse. For instance, if, a plastic fork was 10 times the price, people might take better care of it and use it a lot more than just one time. So I think that's important, and also maybe a cap on plastic production, which would be something to discuss at the United Nations level, like they say, a cap on carbon emissions.
Indeed. And Maria, what are some of the other things that you all are looking at, or that you could talk to us about in terms of helping to curb the problem?
Well, I really believe in the fact that what you see is happening now is that Shell and BP and everybody, all those big oil companies are now investing in plastic because they are going into fracking and schaliegas. And what I do think, there is a wonder material called Scampla. Scampla is being invented by Cambridge University, and it is plastic made of, it compares with spiderweb, and it's completely biodegradable, and it's everything you want. And I really think if we could upscale that kind of innovations, we don't need plastic anymore, and we have the same product but without the negative effects of it. And if we, all people, are willing to embrace these kinds of innovations, we fight ourselves out of this disaster.
Indeed. And I did read something recently earlier in the month on one of our shows where they were saying that a lot of the major oil companies were pushing more plastic products as a way to monetize some of their production.
But there are alternatives. There is a lot of innovations going on that is not toxic and which are biodegradable, and we can really work with that and make the world a little bit nicer, cleaner, and more to live in for next generations, I would say.
Indeed. And as you had mentioned earlier too, Maria, that has to be pushed out probably through us as consumers. Thank you all so much. You have made us much smarter. And as always, we just never have enough time to hear from interesting expert people who are doing things out there to help us move forward with all of this in our society. So again, thank you. We have been today with Maria Westerbos, who is founder and director of the Plastic Soup Foundation, and with Dr. Hans-Peter Arp, who is a professor in environmental chemistry at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, as well as being an expert advisor at the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening in today to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. The conversation starts here, but our goal is for it to continue in your home, in your social circles, your workplaces, at the water cooler, and in the grocery checkout line, so that we can all work together to realize that healthy living is simply not possible without a healthy planet. Our culture is a result of 1 trillion tiny acts taken by billions of people every day, like yourself. And each of these tiny acts can seem insignificant, but all of them add up, one way or the other, to the change that we each live through. This is your host, Bernice Butler. Thank you for listening in today, and join us again next week for more Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio for our last show this month on plastic pollution. Thank you.